Hello everyone, myself Piyush Kumar. So I hope you remember that we had started a series on the self-study history optional, and in this particular series we had already covered two topics, right? So in those two videos we have basically talked about the topics of ancient India, and in fact not the complete ancient India, rather like half of the syllabus of ancient India, and then what are the most important and relevant readings, and in fact what section you need to cover from that particular topic. This also we have discussed, right? And I hope you still remember that why this kind of various sources required for covering the syllabus of UPSC. Why? Because you cannot cover the whole syllabus from one book, or let's say particularly one source, and that's why you need to collect your information from the various sources, right? So let us continue that, but before continuing this, my apology is there. Why? Because I just got late in bringing this second video, the third video, and that's the reason because of what I'm giving this apology. But here onwards, I'm promising you that in coming 10 days we'll cover all those remaining topics of medieval India, modern India, and then world history as well, right? So let's start this video. So when it comes to the syllabus, covering of the syllabus, right? So in part 1 we had already covered the topics till the Vedic period. So then onwards we are going to cover in this particular video. Okay, fine. So the next topic which is there is the period of Mahajanpada, right? So first of all, let us understand that whenever it comes to the period of Mahajanpada, what are the important dimensions that you need to cover here? So frankly speaking, there are 3 or let's say maximum 4 areas from where you can expect a question. Right. So first area is state formation, the second area is urbanization, that's the second urbanization, the third area is the most important one, that's Buddhism and Jainism, and the fourth area is the society of this particular part is very important, and that's why you should focus on these areas whenever you have been covering any content. And the way you can find that this remains very important, and that's why last 5 years at least 4 questions have been asked, and if you'll see the nature of these questions, you all will be able to realize one thing. Either the questions are based on the dimensions what I have discussed, or sometimes what they have done, they have just mixed 2 or 3 dimensions together, and then they have framed the question, and that's how here a conceptual idea is also very much required. So when it comes to Mahajanpada period, from where exactly it should be covered? So actually here I have given you the list of 4 important readings. The first is MA IGNOU material, the second is the cultural history of India, that is written by A.L. Bossum. The third is a history of ancient and early medieval India, that is written by Upinder Singh. The fourth is ancient India by B.D. Mahajan. What topics you must cover from these kind of books, I'll come to them gradually. So first of all, whenever it comes to understanding whenever it comes to the MA IGNOU material, now Buddhism and Jainism, these are 2 areas which are beautifully discussed here, and in fact if we'll try to correlate or juxtapose the questions at one hand and the content given in the MA IGNOU material, then you will be able to realize there are certain questions they have been directly picked from here, such as I am just giving one example, such as when you talk about the Buddhism getting inspired from Upanishads, or let's say sort of influences of Upanishads on Buddhism, right? So if it comes to these kind of questions, that could be covered from here, and that's why Jainism, that is there in unit 8, and then Buddhism, which is there in unit 9, and as you all know that we have been uploading these kind of materials in the website, so you can actually download these materials from there. So you have to cover Buddhism and Jainism from here, right? Okay, moving to the next thing, that is about basically again this is the book of A.L. Bossum, A Cultural History of India. So now again you can cover the Buddhism and Jainism from here. Here I must tell you that if you have been doing it from MA IGNOU material, in that case you can avoid this also. But then if you want a better understanding of Buddhism and Jainism, or let's say covering multiple dimensions from Buddhism and Jainism, in that case I think consulting this particular topic would be good for you. Okay. Now next is the book of Upinder Singh, right? So when it comes to the book of Upinder Singh, there are several areas which are important in this particular book. So specifically when it comes to state formation, that you should do from this particular topic, right? Particular book. And apart from this, like when it comes to Buddhism and Jainism again, so Buddhism and Jainism can be covered from this book, specifically certain dimensions. And let me show you that what sort of dimensions, such as there was one topic given here, that's the social implication of Buddha's teaching, right? That is the social implication of Buddha's teaching. And now this is something that you can find here only. So it may be correct that I am slightly complicating the things, right? Why am I saying so? That it's the same topic, Buddhism and Jainism, I have been asking you to cover from multiple topics, right? But then you should always keep in mind that since the questions are being asked from multiple dimensions, so you need to cover the content on them, right? And if you have been not doing it, in that case ultimately you won't be able to write a perfect answer in the exam. That's the reason because of what I have been suggesting you to do so. And the way you find repeated questions are coming from Buddhism and Jainism, that's why it is important for you, right? So couple of dimensions should be covered from here. But then when it comes to state formation, that should be done from here. When it comes to the ganas or sanghas, that could be done from here, right? Then apart from this, like when it comes to the social condition during the Mahajanpada period, that is very important portion. So far you might not have seen a question from this part, but in future you can definitely expect a question from this part. So keep in mind this also should be covered from here. But then when it comes to covering the social aspects of Mahajanpada period, then another book is there of like Ranavir Chakravarti. That is that would be also quite helpful, but I have avoided it, cover it from here only, that would be sufficient. Okay. Moving to the next important book, that is the book of B.D. Mahajan, right? Now why B.D. Mahajan is important? There are certain areas, of the syllabus which are beautifully covered in the book of B.D. Mahajan. What is the beauty of this book? Let me tell you. Whenever you have been writing answers, what is the most important requirement? That you are having good number of points. If you see the book of B.D. Mahajan, in that case you can find that there are couple of areas what had been covered beautifully in this book, and in fact you can find the pointers in this book. So just going through this book could be quite helpful for you, and that's why couple of portions you can cover from here also. So whenever you have been doing the Mahajanpada period, all these things you need to keep in mind, and that would be more than sufficient for you, and it is an important area, always keep in mind. Let's move to the next topic. Now it is about the Mauryan period. So when it comes to Mauryan period, now again coming to the same point, first of all you understand that in Mauryan period what are the dimensions which are very important. So the first dimension is about the various sources, right? Arthashastra at one hand, Indica on the other hand. From these two sources you can find separate questions, right? And possibilities are there. Apart from that, the nature of Mauryan state remains a very important topic, and then it comes to basically Asoka and his Dhamma, or Asoka's relationship with Buddhism. Got the point? So these are a couple of dimensions which are important. One more thing. So whenever it comes to Mauryan Empire, you have to always you have to always focus on the relationship of Mauryan with the other powers, or let's say the neighboring powers. This is also one area which is in future going to be important. And there's one more dimension, that's about basically the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So basically these 4-5 dimensions are there, only the possibilities are there of questions from these areas. So that's the reason because of what you try to cover these areas very carefully. Now let us come and discuss about the questions that have been asked So when it comes to this topic, you can find that every year at least one question is definitely being asked from this question. And here all these questions what I have included here, again they are from last 5 years, and that's the reason I am telling you that every year you can find one question from this part, right? So if it is about this, so this should be covered from two important books, one important book, that is the book of Upinder Singh first, right? That is the history of ancient and early medieval India. And in this particular book, what are the topics that you'll find, that I'll discuss. Okay, fine. And the second thing is my notes, that would be also sufficient. So when it comes to the book of Upinder Singh, right? So all those topics that I have discussed, such as you can study the sources, though they are not complete coverage of sources, well, the partial information had been provided. But whenever it comes to Arthashastra, there are several areas which are being asked from here. So that's why you should collect some more information on them, and probably this is the reason because of what I have included my notes also. Because if you go through my notes, in that case I have covered everything categorically, such as when it comes to the sources of Mauryan Empire. So all the possible sources are there, and in fact since Arthashastra and Indica are more important, and that's the reason because of what I have included them beautifully here, so you can cover the things from here also. So like if you are merging these two like sources, in that case I think most of your requirements will be fulfilled from these two sources. So cover the Mauryan Empire from this particular part, right? Okay, let's move to the next area, that is the post-Mauryan period. Now when it comes to post-Mauryan period, it is a slightly complicated area for you, right? But on the other hand, you'll find that the questions are also being asked from the post-Mauryan period, right? So yeah, the questions are being asked from the post-Mauryan period, and here again I should tell you very categorically that whenever it comes to the post-Mauryan period, though number of questions are bit less here, but in future you can find more number of questions from this part. And what is more important, that since this particular part is known for multiple developments, that too like from various areas, and that's the reason because of what here a conceptual understanding with good amount of facts are required, and that's why you should cover it beautifully. यहाँ पे बहुत सारे dimensions है जिसको आप cover करना चाहिए आपको, और इन dimensions को cover करने के लिए थोड़ी चीज़ें थोड़ी यहाँ पे complicated है. So this you always keep in mind. Now what are the sources we are going to talk about, we are going to cover here. Post-Mauryan period is known for some of the structural changes in polity, इकोनॉमी, सोसाइटी एंड आर्ट एंड कल्चर एज वेल, राइट. सो अगर इतने सारे स्ट्रक्चरल चेंजेस हैं तो मुझे लगता है कि उसको भी कवर थोड़ा कंसेप्चुअली करना चाहिए कि अगर क्वेश्चंस थोड़े ट्विस्टेड फॉर्म में भी आते हैं तो आप उसको आंसर कर सकें. और यही वजह है कि यहाँ पे आई हैव रिकमेंडेड द बुक ऑफ रणवीर चक्रवर्ती. Why Ranveer Chakravarti? Because if you read this particular book, in that case you could have a very good conceptual understanding of this part कि ठीक है भाई पॉलिटी में क्या इंपॉर्टेंट चेंजेस हैं या क्या इंपॉर्टेंट ट्रांसफॉर्मेशंस है जो इस पीरियड में आपको दिखाई देते हैं, इकोनॉमी में क्या इंपॉर्टेंट ट्रांसफॉर्मेशंस हैं, राइट, एंड देन मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली सोसाइटी एंड कल्चर में कितने इंपॉर्टेंट ट्रांजिशंस हैं, और सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट है बात कि इनके बीच में आपस में किस तरीके के रिलेशनशिप है. तो अगर आपको इस तरीके से कंसेप्चुअली समझना है तो दैट बुक इज क्वाइट हेल्पफुल. बट देन द सेकंड क्वेश्चन कम कि in that case from where to cover the basically some facts and some contents and historiography. For that I'll say कि my notes would be more than sufficient. So if you have been merging these two topics now, that would be sufficient for you, and that's why read the book of Ranveer Chakravarti. This is the book of Ranveer Chakravarti, right? And what topic you need to cover? Chapter number 5, that is confrontation, commerce and cultural scenario. From the name itself you'll be able to understand कि what are the dimensions जहाँ पे changes आपको दिखाई देते हैं और जहाँ से possibilities है question बनाने की. Fine. And मैंने कहा कि जो चीज़ें यहाँ पे missing है, जो चीज़ें आपको नहीं मिलती हैं, that you can cover from my notes also. तो दोनों को अगर आप एक दूसरे से के साथ जो है juxtapose करते हैं तो I think your requirements should be fulfilled. Okay. Now moving to the next topic, that is about the that is about this early state and society in Eastern India, Deccan and South India, and that various dynasties are there. The South Indian history is also included here. Now this part is again very complicated, and why it's complicated? Because you have to cover the larger part of history, right? And in fact there's so many regions you have to cover here, and that's how it is becoming very complicated, right? Point is that we cannot cover the content from cannot cover the content from so many sources, such as when it comes to Satavahanas, it's not possible for you to cover the content of Satavahana from a separate book, Sangam from a separate book, and so on. And that's the reason because of what here I have just suggested one reading, that is the my notes of the Momentum IAS, and that notes would be sufficient enough because it covers most of the dimensions, right? So instead of getting stuck into various sort of sources, you can cover it from there, and that would be sufficient, right? इसके अलावा आपको और कुछ पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, तो इससे आप सारा कवर कंटेंट कर सकते हैं, ठीक है? Okay, this is the note. That's the post-Mauryan period, and in fact everything you'll find here. Sources के ऊपर अलग डिस्कशन है, ठीक है? संगम एज के ऊपर सारी हिस्ट्री आपको मिल जाएगी. तो जहाँ से भी मुझे लगता है कि क्वेश्चंस की पॉसिबिलिटीज़ है वो हमने कवर ऑलरेडी कर रखा है. तो इंस्टेड ऑफ गेटिंग स्टक इनटू अदर सॉर्ट ऑफ सोर्सेज, दैट्स गुड. ओके, फाइन. Moving next, that is about the Guptas, Vakatakas and Vardhanas. Normally this period is called as the Gupta period, but then you should always keep in mind that again here there are so many smaller dimensions, like they are important for you, right? So when it comes to covering all these dimensions, the first of all, what should be your requirement? Like let us see that what kind of questions, like or like what is, whether the questions are being asked from this part or not. So as you can see that in last 5 years at least 5 questions have been asked. तो एक बात तो तय है कि यहाँ से questions आएंगे, और यहाँ से जो questions आते हैं यहाँ पे भी थोड़ी ये clarity होनी चाहिए कि किस तरीके के questions पूछेंगे ये लोग. तो अगर हम type of questions की बात करेंगे तो you should always keep in mind कि in the type of questions, like there are certain changes in the Gupta period. Now what sort of changes? Again, I'll first say political change. Why political change? As it's believed that instead of centralization, now there is a decentralization coming, and as per the Marxist scholars, the feudalism is making or taking entry in this particular period. So you have to understand this important political change, right? The second thing is about the economic change. There is a very popular debate whether the economy was going up or down. So that is the economic change. The third, it is like about society. And let me tell you very categorically that whenever it comes to society, this is the most important part of your syllabus. And in fact, instead of covering just the content on the society of Gupta period, you should try to grasp that what are the major changes happening during this particular period. So the conceptual understanding is very much required. And then finally it comes to the development in art and culture. So whenever it comes to art and culture, you should always understand that there are various kind of changes that could be noticed in temple structure, temple architecture, and then sculptures and so on. So that also you need to cover in this period. So possibilities are there of questions from all these areas. Now the point is that from where to cover it, right? So for that I'll say just two things. Okay? There's one is the book of Ranavir Chakravarti. Why Ranavir Chakravarti? Again I'm recommending Ranavir Chakravarti because it is giving you the conceptual understanding of the topic. And now this conceptual understanding should be definitely studied along with certain factual information. And for the factual information you can cover the book of Ancient India, that is of B.D. Mahajan. अगर आप ये किताब देखेंगे तो इसमें बहुत सारे dimensions हैं जो cover है, एक एक करके हम बात करते हैं उसके ऊपर. Okay, fine. So first, this particular book, what chapter you should cover? So this is the chapter number 6, which is talking about the political, social and cultural overview, the epoch of the Gupta and their contemporaries, right? So this book has actually, this book has been actually developed in such a way that it could get a very good conceptual understanding of the developments or the transformations happening in this period. And it's talking about both political, social and cultural. मैंने यही 3 dimensions कहे थे along with the economy जो important है, और 3 dimensions के बारे में इन्होंने बहुत अच्छे से बात की है, right? But then these are shorter information, they are conceptual information, right? So when you need to fill it with some sort of factual information, from where to do it, right? So for that I have recommended the book of B.D. Mahajan, and here I have just given you one chapter, but there were 2-3 chapters actually, and they are smaller chapters, ठीक है? So आप परेशान मत होइए कि बहुत सारे chapters मैं सजेस्ट कर रहा हूँ, 3-4 पेजेस के जो है chapters है, और वो chapters आपके उस gap को fill कर देंगे. तो ये 2 किताबें हैं जिसको आप कंसल्ट कर सकते हैं, और वो आपके टॉपिक को कवर कर देगा. ओके, फाइन. लेट्स मूव टू द नेक्स्ट टॉपिक, दैट इज द रीजनल स्टेट ड्यूरिंग द गुप्ता एरा. नाउ I have told you earlier also, most probably in the lecture 1 I had been discussing about the increasing significance of this particular topic, and I can give you in written format that in coming few years this chapter is going to become more and more important for you, right? Why? There are several reasons. I am not going to discuss about those reasons here, but then I am telling you that it's going to become important, and in fact if you'll see the nature of questions, right, so you will be able to understand that it has already become important, and in future as I am telling you that you can expect more number of questions, right? So for this how to cover, or for this topic how to cover, so for that I have suggested couple of reading. When you have been covering the syllabus of this topic, keep in mind that what are the problems, complications क्या है इस एरिया में. Complications ये है कि एक तो बहुत सारी regional histories है इस period में, और apart from that you can again find so many structural changes, that is roughly known as the early medieval period of India. So when it comes to early medieval period, you know about so many regional dynasties, then the evolution of Rajputas, a sort of like very flourished history in South India, then certain changes in North India, the feudalism and so on. There are several dimensions like that you need to cover, and ये थोड़ा complicated बनाती है. और एक part जो मैंने आपको नहीं बताया, that is about the cultural part, right? So whenever you have to understand the Indian culture, I believe that this is a period when Indian culture was taking shape. And in fact, like more or less I can say, the way you see the Bhakti movement, temple architecture, sculptures, painting and so on. So it's giving a sort of like shape to Indian society and culture, and that's why the questions are even possible from this part. थोड़ा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है, क्वेश्चंस भी आ रहे हैं, तो इसको हमें थोड़ा ठीक से कवर करना चाहिए, जो कि सबसे इग्नोर्ड पार्ट रहा है. प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि किसी भी किताब में आपको बहुत अच्छी और बहुत ऑथेंटिक इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं मिलती है. ऑथेंटिक से मेरा मतलब यही है कि जो हमें अपने आंसर्स को लिखने के लिए चाहिए, और इस वजह से ये थोड़ी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है, राइट. अगेन क्वेश्चन लिखने के लिए क्या चाहिए, हमारे पास एक बेहतर कंसेप्ट होना चाहिए, कंटेंट होना चाहिए और थोड़े फैक्ट्स होने चाहिए अलॉन्ग विद द हिस्टोरियोग्राफी, राइट. दीज आर द बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट्स ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर पार्ट, राइट. सो फ्रॉम वेयर टू कवर इट. So first of all, I'll tell you that the book of B.D. Mahajan is important. Why? Because there are a couple of topics that are like I have listed here, chapter number 43, 44, 45 and 50. So there are 4 chapters and they have been categorically covering all these parts, and I'll tell you that what are the parts being covered here. Then it comes to the cultural history of India, that's written by A.L. Bossum. Now this is precisely covering the cultural part, and as I had been telling you that there are several cultural developments in this particular period, and they all are beautifully covered here, and that's the reason because of what you should like see this particular book, okay. And then whatsoever remaining parts are there, that you can cover from the notes of ours, right, Momentum IAS history optional notes, because they like these notes are somehow filling the gaps. Wherever the gaps are there, like they'll be filled by it, okay. Okay. So when it comes to like the discussion about the topics, okay. So okay, like let's look at the question. In 5 years there are 10 questions that they have asked. In 5 years they have asked 10 questions. So you can understand कि how come the significance this topic has increased. तो आप hesitate मत करिए कि इतना सारा पढ़ना पड़ेगा. अगर आपको अच्छा स्कोर करना है तो आपको अगर 300 के आसपास पहुंचना है, या you are really aspiring to cross 300, in that case I think choices are less, right. Okay, this is the book of like ancient India, that is by B.D. Mahajan, and in fact here you can find the Pallava is being covered here, the Cholas is being covered here, the tripartite struggle has been covered here. So if you go for like and the contribution of South India to Indian culture, so all these aspects from where I find the possibilities of questions I have included here. They are beautiful chapters. आपको बहुत अच्छे pointers भी मिल जाएंगे, आपको facts भी मिल जाएंगे, और ठीक ठाक जो है थोड़ी पुरानी हिस्टोग्राफी मिलेगी, लेकिन मिल जाती है इस किताब में. लेकिन एटलीस्ट आपके पास कुछ हिस्टोरियंस होंगे जिसको आप कोट कर सकते हैं, जिसको आप लिख सकते हैं, जिसकी हेल्प से, ठीक है. देन इट कम्स टू लाइक द बुक ऑफ A.L. Bossum, and in this book the early art and architecture, right. This was like this is basically from that collection of articles. So this is not that book, The Wonder That Was India. It is basically cultural history of India written by A.L. Bossum. तो इसमें एक आर्टिकल है, इसमें P.S. राउसन का आर्टिकल है. इस आर्टिकल में आपको थोड़े कल्चरल हिस्ट्री में जो भी डेवलपमेंट्स है वो आपको मिल जाएगा. एंड फाइनली एज आई टोल्ड यू दैट ऑल दोज टॉपिक्स विच आर गिवन इन द सिलेबस, यू कैन फाइंड द इंफॉर्मेशन इन माई नोट्स. सो अगर आप यहाँ से भी कवर करते हैं, आप उल्टा जाते हैं, अगर आप यहाँ से इसको कवर करते हैं और जहाँ पे भी आपको लगता है कि थोड़े और इन्फॉर्मेशन होती तो ठीक होती, तो आप जो है बाकी के जो 2 सोर्सेज मैंने रिकमेंड किए आप उसमें से कर सकते हैं. ओके फाइन. So that's how we are just done with this like ancient India, and in fact though you may find that I have been recommending you so many sources, frankly speaking there are only couple of books that I have recommended, and I have categorically told you the chapters that you need to cover. But लेकिन मैं आपके काम को आसान कर रहा हूँ instead of making it complicated. Why? Because I am telling you specifically कि which part should be covered from where. तो अगर आपको ये पहले से पता है तो आपके लिए मेरे हिसाब से काम ज़्यादा आसान है, और आपकी कंटेंट की क्वालिटी जो है इससे मल्टीपल टाइम्स जो है इन्हांस होने वाली है. दैट्स द ब्यूटी ऑफ दिस. ओके. So if you really want to like get better information on these kind of things, so first of all be like with us, and at the same time you can join our Telegram channel also. So in Telegram channel you can find like sometimes we'll keep on updating some content also, sometimes some short notes and other thing. तो उसके थ्रू आप अपडेटेड रह सकते हैं. नोट्स वाली चीज़ें आपको वहाँ पे मिल जाती हैं जो एडिशनल होते हैं. ये सारी चीज़ें तो हम जो डिस्कस कर रहे थे दैट तो हैव ऑलरेडी अपलोडेड इन द वेबसाइट, और आगे आने वाले टॉपिक्स के लिए भी हम अपलोड कर देंगे. लेकिन टेलीग्राम में आपको कुछ प्रिसाइज नोट्स, कुछ क्रिस्प नोट्स जो है अगर आपको चाहिए होगा तो इनफैक्ट तो हम हर टॉपिक पे नोट्स शेयर करते रहते हैं, तो आपको वो मिलेगा. राइट. सो प्लीज़ लाइक जॉइन आवर टेलीग्राम चैनल, दैट वुड बी क्वाइट हेल्पफुल. ओके. थैंक यू ऑल. थैंक यू वेरी मच.